Most men don't fail because they're weak. They fail because they're cheap. Not in money, but in access. And the moment you understand that, everything you've been begging for starts chasing you instead. There's a lie that's been sold to you since childhood. A comforting one, a dangerous one. It says, be available, be helpful, say yes, show up more, give more. It promises that effort alone will be rewarded. But look around. The most exhausted men you know are the most ignored. The most accessible are the most disrespected. And the ones always there are the first to be overlooked. Why? Because value does not respond to effort. It responds to scarcity. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people never confront. Every time you make yourself easy to access, you quietly teach the world how little you're worth. Pause on that. Not because you lack skill, not because you lack intelligence, but because you overexposed yourself. Think about how desire actually works, not how movies describe it, not how motivational posters frame it, but how the human brain really behaves under pressure. The mind does not chase what it can have anytime. It chases what might disappear. This is not romance. This is not arrogance. This is behavioral psychology. And centuries before psychology had a name, one man understood this pattern coldly and completely. Machiavelli never asked, "How do I be liked?" He asked, "How do I become necessary without being reachable?" That distinction changes everything. Let me tell you a story. There was a man, sharp, capable, disciplined. He worked harder than everyone around him, answered every message instantly, agreed to every request, stayed late, helped without being asked. People praised him, then ignored him, then replaced him, and he never understood why. Another man worked fewer hours, spoke less, was slower to respond, unavailable by default, selective with his time. People waited for him, sought his approval, paid him more, listened when he spoke, same talent, same intelligence, different pricing. Here's the part no one warns you about. The world doesn't calculate your value based on your intentions. It calculates it based on how much of you it can consume. If you are always present, you become background noise. If you are always available, you become infrastructure. Useful, but invisible. And invisibility is the death of power. This is where most men panic. They hear this and think, so I should withdraw, disappear, act superior. No, that's amateur thinking. Making yourself expensive is not about ego. It's about control of supply. Every market works the same way. Flood it, prices drop. Restrict it, prices rise. Human attention follows identical laws. When you respond instantly, you signal need. When you over-explain, you signal insecurity. When you chase acknowledgement, you signal dependence. And dependence repels respect. The brutal paradox is this: the more you try to prove your value, the less valuable you appear. Machiavellian power is built on restraint, on omission, on silence used intentionally. Gold does not announce itself. Diamonds are not passed hand to hand. They wait. And here's the real twist. Scarcity doesn't mean absence. It means controlled presence. It means when you speak, it lands. When you show up, it matters. When you say yes, it carries weight. But that requires a painful shift. You must stop trading your time to feel needed. You must stop performing for approval. You must stop confusing kindness with surrender. Because the world doesn't reward generosity without boundaries. It exploits it. This is why the most powerful men are calm, unrushed, unreactive. They don't chase momentum. Momentum chases them. And if that feels uncomfortable, good. Growth always feels like withdrawal at first. In the next part, we'll expose the psychological trap that keeps intelligent men stuck in permanent availability and why breaking it feels like social death before it feels like freedom. Most people never escape it. The question is, will you? There is a silent addiction ruining capable men everywhere. It doesn't look like weakness, it looks like responsibility, and that's why it's so deadly. The trap begins innocently. You respond quickly because you're professional. You help because you're reliable. You say yes because you don't want to seem difficult. And slowly, almost invisibly, you build a reputation, not as a leader, not as a force, but as someone who is always available. Here's what no one tells you about availability. It feels like control until it becomes a leash. The brain craves certainty, and when people know they can reach you anytime, they stop respecting your time and start owning it. At first, it feels good. Messages, requests, invitations. You feel important. But importance built on access is unstable, because the moment access is guaranteed, importance disappears. This is the psychological mechanism at work. Predictability kills perceived value. The human mind is wired to ignore what it can predict. It tunes out repetition. It dismisses consistency when it lacks friction. That's why the man who always answers becomes background noise, and the man who answers selectively becomes a priority. This is where most men sabotage themselves. They confuse being needed with being respected. Needed men are consumed. Respected men are consulted. There is a difference. Let me make this uncomfortable. If people get upset when you delay a response, if they guilt you for not being available, if they say, "You've changed the moment you set boundaries," that's not loss, that's withdrawal. They were addicted to your access. Machiavelli understood something brutal. Power does not come from pleasing the many. It comes from making others adjust to you. Availability reverses hierarchy. When you are always reachable, you adapt to others. When you are scarce, others adapt to you. And adaptation defines power. Here's the part most motivational content avoids because it's uncomfortable. When you start making yourself scarce, people will test you. They'll push. They'll provoke. They'll attempt to reestablish the old dynamic. They'll say things like, "Why are you acting different? Are you too busy for us now? You used to be more helpful." This phase feels like rejection, but it's actually recalibration. You are teaching the world a new price, and prices always face resistance when they rise. Think of any luxury brand. They don't explain their price. They don't justify it. They don't apologize for it. They simply exist at that level, and the market adjusts. Scarcity is not created by words. It's created by behavior, by delays, by silence, by selective engagement. Not rudeness, not hostility, precision. Machiavellian restraint is surgical, not emotional. You don't disappear dramatically. You don't announce boundaries. You embody them. You reply later. You choose fewer commitments. You stop filling silence with explanations. And something fascinating happens. People start leaning in. They listen more carefully. They measure their words around you because uncertainty has returned. And uncertainty breeds attention. This is the moment many men retreat because scarcity feels like risk. What if they forget me? What if I lose opportunities? What if I'm replaced? But here's the paradox. The men who are easiest to replace are the ones who are always available. Scarcity doesn't make you invisible. It makes you distinct. And distinction is the foundation of power. In the next part, we're going to break down the most dangerous mistake men make when trying to become scarce. The mistake that turns strategy into arrogance and destroys everything they've built. Most people get this wrong, and the cost is social exile. Most men don't fail at becoming expensive. They fail because they turn strategy into attitude. And the moment scarcity smells like ego, power collapses. There is a thin, dangerous line very few men know how to walk. On one side, scarcity. On the other, arrogance. One commands respect. The other invites resistance. And the tragedy is this: many men finally learn to pull back, only to ruin everything by changing who they are instead of changing how they engage. This is the fatal error. They stop responding and start ignoring. They set boundaries and start performing superiority. They withdraw and replace calm with contempt. And people feel it instantly. Scarcity should feel grounded. Arrogance feels reactive. Machiavellian power is quiet. Ego is loud. Here's how you can tell the difference. Scarcity does not explain itself. Ego needs to be understood. Scarcity is consistent. Ego fluctuates with mood. Scarcity is comfortable with silence. Ego panics when not acknowledged. This is where psychology turns ruthless. The human brain does not submit to arrogance, it resists it, but it adapts to authority. And authority is not announced, it is inferred. Let me show you how men destroy their leverage. They start saying things like, "I'm busy now. I don't have time for this. I don't need this opportunity." They weaponize withdrawal, and suddenly, what once felt magnetic now feels hostile. Machiavelli warned against this centuries ago, not in soft language, but in observation. Power must appear natural. The moment it feels forced, it invites rebellion. This is why the most powerful men rarely look powerful at first glance. They look composed, unbothered, measured. They don't reject people emotionally. They let logistics do the work. They delay instead of decline. They redirect instead of confront. They limit instead of lecture. They don't say, "I'm too important." They behave like their time already has value. There's a massive difference. Scarcity is about less access, not less respect. You don't demean others. You don't inflate yourself. You simply stop overextending. Think of it this way. A king does not walk around reminding people he is king. That would be insecurity. The room already knows. Now here's the psychological twist most men miss. When you remove emotional charge from your boundaries, people stop fighting them. Emotion invites negotiation. Calm ends it. This is why over-explaining kills authority. Every extra sentence sounds like permission to push back. Powerful men speak in fewer words, not because they lack empathy, but because they understand finality. And here's the internal test you must pass. If setting boundaries makes you feel angry, you are not ready for power yet, because real scarcity is not built from resentment. It's built from self-respect. Resentment leaks. People feel it, and they respond defensively. Self-respect is stable. It doesn't need validation. This is where many men experience a second panic. They pull back correctly. They remove ego. They maintain calm. And suddenly, people start disappearing. Invitations slow. Messages reduce. Noise fades, and the mind whispers, "See, you needed them." No, this is the purge phase. Every system resists change. Every market sheds excess when prices rise. Those who only valued your availability will leave. Those who value you will adjust. This separation is painful, but necessary, because power cannot be built on dependence, only on respect. In the next part, we will expose the deepest fear that keeps men from fully committing to scarcity, the fear of being forgotten, and why that fear is exactly what keeps them powerless. This is where most men turn back. The fear isn't that you'll lose people. The fear is that without constant noise, you'll discover how replaceable you've been pretending not to be. There is one fear that keeps intelligent men trapped in availability longer than anything else. It's not failure, it's not rejection, it's not even poverty, it's irrelevance. The quiet terror that if you stop showing up, stop responding, stop proving, no one will come looking for you, and that fear feels logical, because in a world addicted to visibility, silence feels like erasure. But here's the truth most men never confront. If your presence must be constantly advertised to be remembered, it was never powerful to begin with. Power does not beg for recall. It creates gravity. Machiavelli understood that the most dangerous position is not being hated. It is being forgettable. And ironically, constant availability accelerates forgettability. Why? Because the brain categorizes what it can access easily as non-essential, like air, necessary but unnoticed. You don't admire air, you don't protect air, you only notice it when it's gone. This is where scarcity becomes psychologically violent in a productive way. When you withdraw strategically, you create a vacuum, and vacuums demand explanation. People begin to ask, where did he go? What is he doing? Why isn't he responding? Curiosity awakens, and curiosity is the gateway to respect. But to reach that stage, you must endure the silence test. This is the period where nothing seems to happen, no immediate rewards, no instant validation, just space. And space terrifies men who built their identity on being needed, because silence forces a confrontation with a question you've been avoiding. Who am I if no one is pulling at me? Most men flee at this moment. They rush back to familiarity. They reoffer themselves, and in doing so, they confirm the lie that their value only exists through consumption. But the men who endure this phase experience a shift that changes everything. They stop measuring worth through response. They stop equating movement with progress. They stop confusing busyness with importance. They begin to feel something unfamiliar, stillness. And in stillness, hierarchy resets, because now you are no longer reacting, you are choosing, and choice is the first visible signal of power. This is where Machiavellian strategy becomes internal before it becomes external. You stop asking, do they need me? You start asking, is this worth me? That inversion alone elevates you. Here's something uncomfortable but necessary. If disappearing even briefly collapses your relevance, your position was never secure. A true value survives absence. In fact, it intensifies through it. Think of the men history remembers. They were not omnipresent, they were deliberate. Their words arrived rarely, but when they did, they shaped outcomes. Scarcity doesn't make you forgotten. It filters your audience. It removes the consumers and reveals the investors. And investors behave differently. They wait, they observe, they adjust. But here's the danger most men stumble into at this stage. They mistake silence for inaction. They think scarcity means doing nothing. Wrong. Scarcity is not emptiness. It is concentration. You redirect energy inward. You sharpen skills privately. You build leverage where no one is watching. This is why true power often appears sudden to outsiders. They didn't see the quiet accumulation. They only see the moment of emergence. And that moment shocks them because they assume silence meant stagnation. In reality, silence was preparation. In the next part, we'll expose the difference between fake scarcity and real leverage, and why some men withdraw but never rise. This distinction determines whether you command respect or simply fade away. Most men confuse the two. The most dangerous moment is not when you are ignored. It's when people finally start treating you differently. That's when most men panic and give their power back. Scarcity works. That's the part no one argues with. The silence shifts. The tone changes. People pause before speaking to you, and suddenly you feel it. Respect. But it doesn't arrive the way you imagined. It comes with distance, with formality, with fewer casual interactions. And this is where many men self-destruct. They miss the old warmth, the easy laughter, the constant messages, so they try to restore it. They overcompensate, they re-explain, they soften boundaries, and without realizing it, they send a signal. I'm uncomfortable with the new hierarchy. The world hears that immediately. Power requires comfort with asymmetry, not imbalance. Asymmetry. You give less access than you receive. You speak less than others listen. You respond slower than you're contacted. This is not manipulation. This is structure. Machiavellian power is not built on affection. It's built on positioning. And positioning feels lonely at first, because closeness based on convenience disappears. What remains is respect based on weight. Many men mistake that shift for loss. It's not loss, it's compression, fewer interactions, higher quality. This is where discipline matters. You must resist the urge to prove you're still the same guy, because the same guy was underpriced. Growth always costs familiarity. Here's the psychological conflict happening inside you. Your old identity was fed by constant engagement. Your new identity is fed by silence, and silence feels empty until it becomes powerful. The worst thing you can do now is chase reassurance, asking, "Are we good? Did I offend you?" Just checking in. Those phrases erase leverage instantly, because power never checks if it's allowed to exist. It simply exists. Here's what stable power looks like. You remain polite, but brief. Present, but not eager. Available, but not predictable. You don't fill gaps. You let others step into them. And something fascinating happens. People start self-editing around you. They become more intentional. They respect your time without being told. Because boundaries are contagious. But there's a darker temptation here. When respect increases, ego whispers, "You see, you were right. You're above them now. They need you." This is where men fall again. Because power corrupted by ego attracts enemies. Machiavelli was explicit about this. Power must be balanced with appearance of normalcy. You do not humiliate. You do not dominate socially. You do not remind others of their position. You let structure do the work. Arrogance creates coalitions against you. Calm authority dissolves them. Remember, the goal is not to be feared. It is to be unignorable. Fear fades. Relevance compounds. Now here's the silent test you must pass. When people respect you more, but like you less, can you hold your ground? Can you resist chasing warmth? Can you tolerate being slightly misunderstood? Can you stay centered without applause? Most men can't. They trade power for comfort, and comfort always demands availability. If you survive this phase, something irreversible happens. You stop needing permission. You stop negotiating your presence. You stop explaining your worth. And once that happens, wealth, real wealth, becomes possible. Not just money, but leverage, options, freedom. In the next part, we'll break down how scarcity directly translates into financial dominance, and why the men who work the hardest are often paid the least. This is where strategy becomes tangible. Hard work does not create wealth. Leverage does. And leverage is born from scarcity, not effort. This is where the illusion finally breaks. You were taught that income follows output, that money is a reward for labor. that if you grind long enough, someone will notice. That belief keeps millions of men permanently exhausted and underpaid, because markets do not pay for effort, they pay for position, and position is determined by how many people can replace you. The more replaceable you are, the harder you must work. The less replaceable you are, the less effort is required to command more. Scarcity is what breaks replaceability. Think about the men who earn the most. They are not the fastest responders. They are not the most accommodating. They are not the most accessible. They are the hardest to get. Their calendars are guarded. Their attention is selective. Their involvement is conditional. And because of that, their time becomes expensive. Machiavelli understood this long before capitalism had spreadsheets. The man who must say yes cannot negotiate. The man who can walk away sets the terms. Walking away is the ultimate leverage. But here's the psychological trap that keeps men poor. They believe money is earned through doing more, so they flood the market with their labor. More hours, more availability, more responsiveness, and prices collapse. Scarcity is what allows pricing power. When you control supply, you control value. This is why consultants who reply slowly earn more than employees who reply instantly, why executives speak less than managers, why decision-makers appear distant. Distance creates gravity. Now let's be precise. Scarcity does not mean laziness. It means focused deployment. You concentrate effort where it compounds. You remove yourself from low-value exchanges. You stop donating energy where there is no return. Most men never do this because it feels cruel. They confuse fairness with equality. But markets are not moral systems. They are incentive systems. And incentives reward what is rare. If your skill is common, you must become scarce. If your time is abundant, it becomes worthless. This is why men who say yes to everything are paid in compliments instead of cash. Reliable, team player, always there. None of those words are attached to high invoices. Power words are different. Limited, booked, selective, unavailable. Those words trigger urgency, and urgency opens wallets. But here comes the internal resistance. When you begin charging more, when you pull back, when you stop over-delivering, you will feel guilt, because your identity was built on being useful. Let that identity die. Usefulness is not power. Indispensability is. And indispensability is created by absence, not presence. Here's the brutal rule. If the system collapses when you leave, you were underpaid. If nothing changes, you were invisible. If people adapt, you are replaceable. Scarcity changes the system. It forces reorganization around you. That's when negotiations shift. That's when respect becomes financial. That's when wealth stops requiring exhaustion. But there's one final obstacle, a psychological ceiling that stops men from fully stepping into this role. The fear of being judged as selfish, cold, uncaring. In the next part, we'll dismantle that moral trap and show why men who fear being labeled selfish never achieve real power. This is where the final resistance lives. The word selfish has kept more men powerless than failure ever has. It's the final leash, and most men never see it. There is a moral weapon quietly used against men the moment they begin to rise. It sounds harmless, virtuous even. You've changed. You're thinking only about yourself. You're not as generous as you used to be. And instantly, guilt floods in, because you were trained to believe that being good means being available, that strength must be softened, that boundaries require apology. This conditioning is lethal to power. Machiavelli saw it clearly. Morality is often used not to elevate society, but to restrain those who threaten existing hierarchies. When you become scarce, you disrupt comfort, and discomfort demands explanation, so they moralize it. They call it ego, they call it selfishness, they call it arrogance. But ask yourself this: who benefits when you stay accessible? Who gains when you remain cheap? Who loses when you finally say no? The answer is never abstract. It is always someone. Scarcity does not harm healthy relationships. It exposes unhealthy ones. The people who respect you adjust. The people who used you protest. And protest is framed as concern. This is where most men collapse. They confuse guilt with wrongdoing, but guilt is often the withdrawal symptom of people losing access to you. Here's the uncomfortable reality. Selfishness is prioritizing yourself at the expense of others. Scarcity is prioritizing yourself instead of being exploited. Those are not the same. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You are not obligated to subsidize other people's comfort with your energy. Power begins when you stop defending your boundaries. Defending invites debate. Boundaries that stand silently end it. Machiavellian strength is not cruel. It is unapologetic. And unapologetic does not mean aggressive. It means settled. You don't argue. You don't persuade. You don't justify. You simply act as though your time matters. And over time, people agree. But there is one more illusion to destroy. Many men believe power must be announced, displayed, demonstrated. This is the final trap. Real power is felt, not seen. The strongest men rarely explain themselves. They let patterns speak. Consistency without explanation is terrifying to those who want control over you, because they cannot negotiate with it. Once you accept this, something profound shifts. You stop measuring yourself by approval. You stop reacting to accusations. You stop fearing labels. And in that silence, you become expensive, not because you demanded it, but because you made yourself impossible to cheapen. Now we arrive at the final question. What happens when you fully embody this? When scarcity is no longer a tactic, but your identity? When you no longer try to be powerful, but operate from it? In the final part, we will close the loop. We will reveal what the expensive man truly becomes, and why, once you reach this state, you can never return to the old world again. This is the point of no return. Once you become expensive, you don't go back. Not because you can't, but because you finally see the game. At this stage, something irreversible happens. You stop trying to control outcomes. You stop managing perceptions. You stop chasing leverage, because leverage now moves toward you. This is what the expensive man becomes. He is no longer reactive, no longer rushed, no longer hungry for validation. His power is not loud. It is assumed. Scarcity is no longer a tactic he deploys. It is the byproduct of a life designed around intention. His calendar reflects priorities. His silence reflects confidence. His presence reflects weight. People don't ask why he's unavailable. They plan around it. This is the final Machiavellian truth. Power is strongest when it appears effortless. The moment others believe you are unaffected by their approval, they grant you authority, because authority belongs to the man who cannot be coerced. Now here's the part few talk about. Becoming expensive costs you an old world. The world where everyone had access. The world where effort was mistaken for value. The world where you were praised but not respected. That world will not follow you forward. And that is not loss, that is evolution. You will notice fewer voices, fewer opinions, fewer demands. But each interaction will carry more meaning, more weight, more consequence. This is why powerful men appear calm in chaos. They are not calm because nothing affects them. They are calm because they chose what is allowed to affect them. That choice is freedom. You are no longer priced by urgency. You are priced by impact. And impact compounds. Money follows it. Respect follows it. Influence follows it. Not because you chased them, but because you stopped chasing everything else. This is the final shift from being useful to being irreplaceable, from being visible to being inevitable, from being cheap to being expensive. And once you understand this, you will never again give your time away to be seen. You will let the world come to you because it always does when the price is right.